I'm pleased to welcome Deborah Porter on the Company of Dads podcast. As listeners know, we're looking to explore the sweet, sublime, strange, and silly aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men, who are the go-to parents, often feel they have to hide or at least not talk about their roles. A lead dad is not a traditional role for men, whether you work full-time, part-time, or devote all your time to your family. Now, Deborah, my guest today, is an influential voice on parenting and motherhood and work and business. She runs Porter Systems and is a consultant with organizations and businesses to provide support beyond parental leave for working parents. Through Porter Systems, she has also helped parents who have been out of the workforce get back in. Deborah has been married for 33 years, has 3 grown children, and lives in the Washington, D.C. area. Deborah, welcome to the Company of Dads podcast.
Paul, it's so great to be here. How are you?
I'm great. All right, let's start. I love systems and I love acronyms. I love everything. I want to know right out of the gate, what are the 3 C's in your approach?
The 3 C's are clarity. We've got to get clear on what's the priority, because what we've done in our culture is we've taken the word priority and we pluralize it. So now instead of I have something that I have to handle today that's the priority, I have a list of priorities, which means nothing is really the priority. So we identify the thing, we get clarity, we get some confidence around our skill set. What are our strengths? What are we naturally good at as people, as parents, as employees, as caregivers? What are those strengths and how do I use those to my advantage? So we've got clarity, we've got confidence, and then we want to move in courage. You know, it takes courage to be able to say no, whether it's to a kid, whether it's to your boss, because you don't want to miss this next performance of your kid because you've already missed 2 concerts already.
Yeah.
So once we can get some clarity, some confidence, and some courage in this thing called work-life family balance, which by the way is never 50-50, but once we get those 3 C's around it, I think we step into it a little bit differently.
Let's go back and talk about clarity, and you talk about priorities should become priority. But so many people who are working parents, whether working moms, working dads, they talk about multitasking. I'm a great multitasker. Are you saying that is not a good way to be, or are you saying that they need to sort of, focus on one thing at a time? Help the listeners understand what you mean by having that single priority.
Well, I will say this, that the medical research shows that we were created as monotaskers. That's how our brains work and work at the optimal level as a monotasker. When our brains are having to shift from thing to thing, okay, I'm working on this. So perfect example. I'm helping with homework, I'm cooking dinner, and I'm paying the bills online. I'm doing all of this at one time. It is challenging and difficult for your brain to give all of its attention to any one of those things when there's a constant bouncing around. So I agree with the research. I think we were created as monotaskers. However, I know that that's not, in a perfect world, yes, I would sit down and just do homework with my kid, but other things do have to get done. I would say that multitasking should be something we use sparingly. It should not be the way that we are functioning day to day.
Sorry, I missed the last part of that. I was just texting, but I'm a good just kidding, Deborah. I was not texting. It's one of the things I do a lot. I think when I'm with my kids, I will leave my phone in the other room, and I will focus on what I'm doing with them. And when I'm, working, sometimes if I really have to work intensely, I will turn everything off except for the one thing that I'm doing. And I guess one way that I've always justified that to myself, as long before I started the Company of Dads, back when I was at the New York Times, is if I were in a meeting with somebody, if I was having a very important meeting with somebody, I literally would not in the middle of the meeting, like in the middle of our call, like, hey, Deborah, that's a really great point, but I gotta, let me just text the dog groomer. I gotta get a Christmas dog groomer.
Exactly.
You would never do that. But
Right.
I think we've gotten away from it, and it's sort of a badge of pride. But I agree with you. I think it just, scrambles how we're going to do it. But when you talk about, sort of courage to sort of change, the narrative and the way you're going to work, particularly, coming out of the pandemic or work from home.
Yes,
How do
for sure.
how do you help people get that courage? What are easy ways to say like, okay, you want to, I mean, stand up is the wrong word. It's not like you want to be confrontational, but you want to be able to tell your boss, hey, this is important. I need to do this. Or, remember, I measured on outcomes, not on, FaceTime in the office. How do you help people develop that courage to say, I'm still a great employee, but let me work in the way that's going to optimize a lot of different things in my life?
I think one way we do that, one way that I help parents do that and support them around that is how to have difficult conversations, right? No one's saying this is going to be easy, and no one's saying that you're going to feel really confident walking into this conversation, but it's a skill set of how to have difficult conversations. It's a skill set of knowing timing. Sometimes what you have to say is great, but the timing you pick to do it is horrible. And so you've got to know the right timing. I always love to be able to give people notice. So as soon as you're aware of something, if you can put that on a calendar, and fantastic, if this is a shared calendar amongst your team or other people have access to it, to know that that time is already blocked off as soon as possible. And I think the other part of this is just being human. I think if the pandemic has shown us anything, and the lockdowns and just the, virtual and remote working and kids running around behind us naked and, just all of that going on, we're human and we have more in common than not. And so I think just being able to come to it as a person and saying, look, there's something really important going on in my family. I've met the deadline. I can still get that to you on time, but these hours, I'm not going to be able to be here. I don't think that's going to impact anything we've got going.
But I love like signaling it, like, hey, John, I'm gonna ruin your afternoon. So what's a good afternoon for me to ruin it? I got some stuff I gotta tell you. Like, why don't I
give me
ruin
the
it
best day? Right,
no.
right.
I actually had a similar thing because we have to, end of the year, got to meet with our accountant, and he wanted to meet on Friday, and I was like, I'm not gonna meet with you on Friday. Like, it's the worst thing. I'm gonna meet with you on Monday. What are you're gonna?
That's a Monday meeting.
What,
yes.
like, unless you're like. Unless it's like Oprah, like you're gonna get $1 million, you're gonna get a brand new.
Right.
Like the accountant never tells you that. You don't want that. And like you're gonna owe money to these people. Yeah,
I'm not meeting with you on Friday and going in my weekend with that. No,
I'm meeting
way.
Monday afternoon. That's what I'm gonna be.
And it's gonna be a rainy Monday afternoon on top of it.
So funny. Your focus has largely been on women and a mix of women in the workplace and women getting back into the workplace. I understand, but there's a growing number of men who are doing more at home. Not as many as reflected in the statistics, but also men who are changing their sort of work schedule. And there's a study, Pew Research did some work in December that talked a lot about this. And, in the company of dads, we talk about, lead dads who work full-time, part-time, or devote all their time to their families. And that latter group often called, stay-at-home moms or dads. But we don't like that phrase. But when you work with that group of women, are there certain sort of skill sets that you work to impart on them that might be translatable to men in a similar position? I mean, the question is really like, when those moms who devote all their time to their family, when they're feeling fulfilled in what they're doing, what are they doing right, and can those things be translated to men in a similar position?
I love that. I love what you're doing. I love the way this is so normal in the conversations that you have and in the way that you're living and in the way that you are inviting lead dads. I love the term. I love the company. I mean, I just think that what you're doing is you're making this normal. It's not a weird thing. It's not kind of like what? I mean, you're taking this choice of how people are choosing to divide up and work the division of labor in their homes, and you're just making it normal. Aside, I think you and I were talking maybe a couple weeks ago, but aside from breastfeeding, there's really nothing that a mom is doing that a dad can't do, and that's really just for a short amount of time. Although I have seen these. Have you seen the fake boob things that men are putting bottles in? And yeah, but that's
I
we'll
try
talk
to
about that another time.
I try to unsee that.
Yeah,
but that was not that. For the record, that was 100% not my question. Okay, that was not. At no point did that come up. You brought that up. All right.
I love what you're doing, and I think what we're talking about really is the normalization of, as a family, us figuring out how is this working for us. And if it's not working for us, if this the setup that we have and the division of labor we have is just working for one person, then it's not going to work, and it's not going to work for long, because someone's going to move into resentment. And so I think really what we're talking about, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is, again, this is a difficult conversation. You're asking someone to change, you're asking someone to view things differently. But I think it's how we step into this conversation. And I don't think the conversation is, you never do X, Y, and Z, or how come I'm always the one, ABC.
Right.
I think the conversation is, how do we show up in this relationship, and what can we do so that we're showing up better for ourselves, for each other, and for our family? And I think that's a different conversation than being accusatory or irritated or frustrated.
Then when you find that people aren't showing up in the way they want to show up, or they're showing up in such a way that they feel that it's not being appreciated by their spouse, whether it's, whichever, husband, wife, whatever, what's going on there? What is generally going on in those situations where the person you're working with feels like he or she is not showing up in the way that they would like to, or vice versa, that they are not being appreciated for how they're showing up? And I guess they probably are looking for the words to articulate how they're feeling.
Yeah. I think what part of what you're describing is the default parent.
Mm-hmm.
And the default parent is the one who is doing the lion's share of the stuff, right? The default parent is making the breakfast, doing the lunch, doing the carpool. Default parent knows all the schedules, doctor's appointments, knows where all the important papers are, is doing nap time, nighttime, bedtime. They're doing it all. And, I talk with moms, and we work on this whole idea of super mom. And do you see her as a superhero and an amazing thing to aspire to, or does she really get on your nerves and you're just not into it? And I find that many mothers, many women see her in a positive light. I happen to think the term itself is negative, and it's damaging to women, because we've taken this guy who's not real. Newsflash, kind of spoiler alert, Superman was a costume. Like, it was, he's not,
I don't believe
not a real dude.
All right, we'll have to agree to disagree there, because I've,
But we've taken that, and now as moms, as women, we're saying, oh, but I can do that. I actually can be super. No, you really cannot be super. And so I think managing expectations, I think not aiming for perfection, and allowing to accept that done is better than perfect any day of the week and twice on Sunday. And I think also inviting and allowing people to step into that space, even when they're not going to do it like you do it, even though we all know that you do it the right way, air quotes, right? My way is the right way. And so I can't let him do it because he's not going to do it the right way. Listen, done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
So I think that's some of what we're navigating through. What does it look like to be super mom, and is it working for you? Managing my expectations and allowing people to step into it, knowing that Rome wasn't built in a day. Your home is not going to be built in a day. This is going to take some intentional effort on how everybody is owning something.
You talk about Superman, I think of obvious, I won't blame it on my kids, one of my favorite movies, The Incredibles. And it's so good. And there's The Incredibles, and then there's The Incredibles 2. And in Incredibles 2, Mr. Incredible, the dad, is out of work. He can't be incredible anymore. And his wife, Elastigirl, is out being a superhero. And what is interesting is, like, for women who are fulfilling this role as, either they're working moms and balancing all kinds of different things, or they opt to be, lead moms and focus on the family. There is this model that is aspirational, superwoman. Now, again, that can be dangerous, all that stuff. But for men, the model is, sort of Mr. Incredible gone to seed. His belly gets big. He can't handle little, like Jack, the one who lights himself on fire, and Elastigirl goes off. And so, like, in a way, like, I'm trying to change that narrative, because that's not, is it funny? Of course it's funny to see Mr. Incredible struggle with being a lead dad, but it's not really, beneficial. And there's this nonprofit called Equimundo who's done a lot of work on this, and like how men are portrayed in popular media. And if men are portrayed in popular media as, dads who are angry, or dads who are bumbling, or dads
or buffoons,
exactly, or who are only really dads because their wife died, or they got divorced, these are not positive, models. And when you think about, the positive models that you help your clients with, what comes to mind if they're the ones who don't look at, you know, superwoman or supermom or superman as a model? How do you help them, you know, find the place that is, you know, right for them and not get into some sort of competitive Instagram battle with their next door neighbor?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So we spent some time working on family core values.
Mm,
I don't know how many of us as families really sit down to figure out what is it about us? What is it for us? What is the thing that for us is most important, more important than anything? And how do we show up? How do we show up in this family for each other? More
mm,
importantly, how do we show up at school, at work? So we spend some time on a family core values exercise, and that involves the kids. I mean, as young as 5, they can be involved in that exercise. And then what that does is we take what we find as family core values, we put those values in sentences that inspire action.
mm.
So it may sound like for our family, one of our action sentences around our core values was, "We are helpers. When we show up, whoever we're with knows that we're ready to roll up our sleeves and help." Whether that's in school with a teacher, with a friend, a new kid, whether that's a new employee, whether it's me with a new mom on the block. It's
Yep.
just something that applies to everybody. So I find that once we understand and know our family core values and what matters to us, the need and even the desire to compare kind of minimizes because I'm clear on me, right? That clarity is important again. I'm clear on what we're doing. I'm clear on why we show up. So the idea, I think we compare because we're not really clear on what's important and what's valuable to us.
That's great. Do you get buy-in from all the members of the family? You have 3 kids, a husband. Do you all sort of come up with these core values together, or how does it? Walk me through the exercises. Sort of, you know, a
Yeah, it's
family
a
court, and
family
somebody has to
meeting.
adjudicate, or you know, did
It's
someone have a super vote or something like that, or what?
it's a family meeting setting, and the earlier you can do this with them, the better. I think our daughter was just approaching teenage years, so it was a lot of eye rolling. She was like, "This is so
And is she your
corny."
oldest of the three? So she
She's
was the
our
old. Yeah, yeah,
oldest. Yeah,
yeah.
she's our oldest, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, mom, where did you find this? This is so corny." But now she's the kid that's now, that's not what we do, people. That's not how we show up. And I'm like, "Oh,
Oh,
really?
that's
You
good though. You,
don't
you 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 gave her
say."
something that she can use against her brother. So that was also very good. So it's, as the oldest,
Right.
so she's got that.
Right. So it's lighthearted. It's fun. It's not an intense time. So we each take a sheet of paper and we're either writing down, right, words that mean something to us, action words. Name an action word that describes something we've done in the family. Or what I'll do is write a bunch of these words out myself, put them in a big bucket, and we pass the bucket around and everybody pulls out a word. Once we can narrow it down to about 4, 5, 6 words, and the baby always gets to pick two, the youngest always, but I can't decide which
Right,
word,
right,
so
right.
the youngest gets to pick 2 words, but whatever. And then we take those words and we make them apply to our everyday lives. Ideally, my husband and I have already had a meeting aside from the kids, and what we're trying to do is help them to walk into their gifts and the things
Right.
that we see in them and the leadership we see in them, or in the helper gifts that whatever it is, we're trying to connect that for them, so that not so much when they're in the house, because I think our kids don't have any plan on living any of this kind of stuff out when they're at home. It's
No.
always when they're outside of the house.
Yeah, it's that's always the, you know, as they fight and they go back and forth, because, you know, like you, I have 3 kids, and like when you see them out in the world, you're like, okay, I guess I'm doing a halfway decent job. That's a good
And people come
representation.
up to you and say, "Your
Yeah.
kids are so amazing," and you're like, "Thank you," and then you go, "What
Which one are
are
you
you
talking about? You said these are my kids, right? Yeah. You got that? Okay. You mentioned your daughter, and I remember when we talked last, you told me a story in which you knew that as a not as a mom, not as a coach, but as a human being, you needed some time, you know, every month or two or however long, often it was, to go and do something for yourself, and it was often an overnight, and you know, not crazy. Um, but there was one moment where you had everything set in motion. You told your kids about it. You talked to your husband about it. But then one of your kids was sick, and you were faced with this conundrum of, you know, do I stay or do I go? I don't want to ruin the story, but tell us, what happened, how you worked through it, and what you ultimately did, because I think it'd be a great example of how people need to think through and prioritize, you
Yeah.
know, time for themselves and for the family.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would do this every quarter. We had 3 kids, still have 3 kids, but our daughter was, I don't know, somewhere around 13. And she woke up that morning sick. She wasn't feeling well. She had something going on with her eye. Like it was just a whole thing. And the mother in me was like, there's no
The
way you
last
can
time you
pull
told me
out.
that, the last time you told me that story, you said a raccoon had attacked her, and she was so that. You can sanitize the story. That sounds a lot better. But all right, it's your story to tell. So,
So, obviously the mom in me is like, you can't leave. Like, look at your kid. What are you, crazy?
yeah,
But I knew that not only was this moment important for me, but it was as important for my kids and for my husband. I needed him to know that I know you got this. There's no way I can step into this and go, there's no way you can handle this. I'm not going.
right.
And in the same token, I needed my kids to know your dad is capable and able. I know I'm the one that's here all the time, and I know I'm the one doing all the things, but he can do this. So I wrote down the phone number of our doctor. Our pediatrician was like a mile and a half away. And I was like, here's the pediatrician's number. I'm sure he'll get you in right away. Bye, smooches, sweetie. You're going to be fine. It's going to be great. And I'll see you guys in 2 days. And I pulled out the driveway and I was crying because the guilt, it's hard to move past
Yeah,
that guilt, but I knew I had done the right thing. It wasn't easy. I mean, doing the right thing is never always easy, but I knew that I had done the right thing. So by the time I got to my destination, they called, oh, doctor gave her a couple of drops. She's fine. She's sitting here eating chips and pizza. I'm like, I'm not even going to ask about that, but okay. All
oh
right.
yeah,
She's eating chips and pizza. Okay, whatever. You guys have a ball. But what I think we all learned something in that. And what we all learned is this thing can function. This ship can move. And I don't have to be the one steering it all the time.
right.
And things can still get done.
But you're right. You would have undermined your husband's authority as a father. Like this is again
Hmm.
not like, it wasn't life or death. And literally, she needed some drops
Right.
in her eyes. Two, it instilled some uh, independence in your oldest child, your daughter, to say, okay, I can do this. And then surely it scared the hell out of your other 2 kids because they're like, Mom's leaving us. What are we doing here? We better behave next time. So
Like, what's happening? Mom is leaving. Oh my God. No, it was great. But it's one of those things that you push through. And just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. I think a lot of times we get uncomfortable and so we freeze. Sometimes you just got to push right through that uncomfortable feeling and go ahead and get to the other side of it. Uncomfortable doesn't mean wrong or bad.
yeah, yeah. Let's segue a little bit and talk to about some of the work you do with businesses, and talk about some of the stuff that has happened in the past year. I mean, I won't go all the way back to the start of the pandemic, but really, as businesses have tried to figure this out, and as I often say, like, there are very few businesses that have taken, sort of a really hard stance. There are a few, we all know them, a hard stance about, working in the office. Most of them, I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt, are trying to figure this out. And some of them are doing a little bit better than others. They're all making
Yeah.
mistakes. They'll look back
Yeah.
on this and do a postmortem, later on.
Right.
But when you look at the ones that are, in your opinion, what are some of the things that they're doing that you find to be very supportive for working parents, and also ultimately good for the company and the business because you have people engaged? What are some of the things
Absolutely.
that stand out?
I think one of the things they're doing first and foremost is they're listening. They're not telling their working parents what they should or need to be doing. They're listening to what their working parents are saying and what they need. I think the other thing they're doing is they're not only being flexible with remote and virtual, but they're being flexible with time in general. You mentioned a term before is outcomes, right? If
Mhm.
it's getting done, are we going to micromanage the time and the hours that people are putting into it? Because I don't know that we even get the biggest bang for our buck when we do that. And I think another thing that the companies that are serious about this, they are not only intentional about the formation of these employee resource groups for parents and caregivers, but they're funding them and
Yeah.
they're bringing in the resources. So it's not just about the flexibility and time, but it's also about the resources to provide the working parents with more support and what they need.
And that last part is really crucial because, ERGs are a big part of what the company Dads is doing. But, one of the knocks against them is it's just can be one more form of unpaid labor. If you don't really fund them, if you don't somehow
Yep.
recognize or compensate or consider in the review the person who is running that group, an employee, running the employee resource group, it's
Yep.
problematic. Yeah.
Yep.
When you talked about before, one of the 3C's was courage, and you talked about the courage to have difficult conversations. When those employees who are trying to figure out their balance between working hybrid, working in the office, where do they need to have courage, and where are they struggling with those conversations with work?
I think part of it is trusting their gut. I think that's a big part for all of us. Trusting what I know I need, like what my own North Star is and what I know I need to do in the face of people on my team who don't even have children, and
Right.
how this may come across or look to them, or there he or she goes again, another performance by another kid, little
Yeah.
remarks and things like that being made. So I think in the place of courage, it's just really being able to stand in what may not initially be the most welcoming remarks, comments, or even culture. Um, so I think just being able to stand in what's valuable to you and what your truth is and what your personal values are, I think that takes great courage.
Yeah, I've always thought that if you get, it's the top performers in the firm, if they
Mhm.
can, push it because they have the most job security. They have the absolute most job security of anyone in the firm. You don't want to lose the top performers. And the bottom performers, you've got the top 30%, the bottom 30%. The bottom 30% can grumble all they want. They're not going to go anywhere, But if you can really get those alliances at work so that those top performers are saying, hey, this is how I'm going to work. And this is why it's important this way. I think they can really, by taking a lead, help everybody else because there may be somebody in the
Yeah.
middle who
Yeah.
doesn't have that standing, who is
Yep.
replaceable. We don't want to say this about people, but they're replaceable.
That's
And
exactly right. And that's what parents are thinking in the back of their mind. Well, I really want to go to this performance, but hey, I really need this job. Like,
yes.
how am I gonna do this? So I agree with you 100%. Absolutely.
All right, Deborah, you're going to be the one of the first podcasts of 2023, even though we're recording this at the end of the year. Tell me, when you look at, next year, I'm a little raspy now, probably the beginning of my so-called triple demic here, something I have. But that aside, when you look at, the landscape for working parents, for parents who had been the lead mom or dad, who are looking to sort of be more fulfilled or return to work, what does that landscape look like in 2023? And just know I'm not going to call you up in a year and tell you what you got right or wrong. I'm just curious
You
as
are wrong. You're
you
a
as
fraud.
like point number 7 was way off. I'm not gonna. No, honestly, I want to. You're talking to both sides all the time. The business leaders, the workers. What do you think 2023 is going to be like?
I think 2023 is going to be one of the strongest years for working parents yet. And the reason I say that is because we cannot unsee and unknow what just happened. I hate to keep using kind of the pandemic. It's kind of like everything is like before the pandemic or after the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, right? But I don't think we can unknow that and unsee what moms have known and families have known forever is how this kind of burden disproportionately has impacted mothers up until this point. But what we've also been able to see now, the curtain has been moved when work came home, when school came home, when home became Grand Central Station, it became really obvious this is not sustainable. The way that we've got this set up is not going to work. So, in my opinion, I think 2023 is going to be one of the strongest years for the working parent. One, because I think we're finding our voice. Two, because I think we've got the organizations and the ERGs that are forming. So the isolation of being that parent that has to keep leaving or that parent that kid keeps getting sick, all parents can relate to that now.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of having this kind of culture, this caring culture around families is going to become more prevalent and more obvious. And I think those are the organizations and companies that are going to not only retain who they have, but they're the ones that are actually going to get the really great talent that's out there.
That's where we're going to end it. That's a perfect spot. Deborah Porter, thank you so much for being my guest on the Company of Dads podcast.
Thanks for having me, Paul. This was great.